And we're back. What's up, everybody? It's me. You know who I am. You're on my channel. You're watching my show. I appreciate it. I appreciate the love. I appreciate everything. I'm getting better. My Bell's palsy is almost gone. I went back to work. I got cleared by the lovely government entity to return to the workforce, so I'm doing that. Working live shows on the weekends. It's great. Back around music, running the festival setting, reminding myself that I am good at something. It's great. It's been wonderful. Anyways, we're going to get right to it. I got a great guest today. One of probably my oldest still standing friends from the music industry. There's a few people I would look up to as not necessarily like a mentor, but like an inspiration. And this guy's one of them. So I'm really happy to have my dear, dear friend, Ray Harkins on the show. Ray is the lead podcast strategist at iHEARTRadio, and he works at Tandem Management Co. and is also a great dude. Ray, what's up?
Joel, it's kind. I feel gassed by you, but I think when, especially in independent music, once you connect with a person, and I remember the shows that we did together in the the Mikoto era, where it was playing it was the 418 project, I want to say
418, baby. Yep.
And meeting you and then knowing you, and it was within 10 to 15 minutes, you and I were both on the level immediately. It was oh, you're one of us. You're good. And then I think that's we can not talk for years and then just dive right back into it and just be yeah, it's fine. This is who we are.
Yeah. And I think the thing that blew my mind the most about when we met, Ray, was you were doing Mikoto, and I was cool dudes from Southern California. That was it. The buck stopped there for me. And then you guys did I think we did 3 or 4 shows for that band, I think. And then it was I remember you were at Peta, and then all of a sudden you were at Century Media. And then somebody was I remember, I forget what your name came up somewhere. You did something. Maybe it was when you were Century and signed a band, or and then you started helping with Sound and Fury for a couple of years. Yep. And somebody was oh, I think that's what it was. Your name was in that circle. And I told somebody I knew you, and they were you know Ray from Taken? And I was I didn't even know. You had never told me about Taken. And I'm kind of a little, well, not anymore, but back then I was young. I was a metalcore kid. I had no preconceived. I didn't know about this whole hardcore thing that had been going on for 10 years before MySpace metalcore.
Sure.
That's what I call it, by the way. The good old times is MySpace metalcore. That's how I refer to it.
The early tens, as it were.
Yes. So now it's always whenever you comment or tweet me back, without fail, Ray, literally the last time you tweeted me back 2 days ago, I think it was, I got a side text you know Ray Harkins? And I'm yeah, yes. And it was not from someone I expected it from. And I was yeah. I was where are you going? Because no, I'm not going to do you a favor that involves him. And they were oh no, I love his show. That's so crazy. How do you guys? And I was dude, everyone in our world, we all exist on the same plane of existence. It's just a matter of if you're one of those idiots that's signed on with some political music industry circle, or if you do your own thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think too, and I'm sure you've experienced this, where it's when you have done all these different things, these disparate things within the music industry, whether it's management, whether it's putting on shows, all of that, people identify you with a certain thing. And then when you've lasted longer than that thing or whatever, obviously everybody does, it's not the band breaks up or you stop doing this. And then once people have those touch points with you, it's so cool, because then people can know you from one thing, but then not even know about you doing this other thing. And that's fine. It's just dude, there's no late to the party, where it's I never would be oh, Joel, did you ever check out my previous metalcore band called Taken? I would never do that.
Exactly.
But then
this is what I love.
Right. But then when you would discover it, you'd be oh, that's cool. And you put all those threads together. And that, honestly, that's what makes it really fun and meaningful, when you can see the trajectory of what a person has done within the context of music, because you're oh, I can see where one begat the other, and then how them doing this one thing helped this one thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my whole thing is and what I also love about specifically your and my situation is 2 things. The first is, it's very rare that there's a band that I didn't know about, especially now in my later years, that I'm I should have known about this band. But when I listened to Taken, I was I almost texted you mad. How did you never
Yeah.
Like, I'm a fan. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to sit here and like keep gassing you hard, but like, I was like, whoa, dude. Like, I loved Mikoto. You guys were a great ass time. We had fun. All those shows were fun, you know? Totally. And then, but then I was like, Taken's like a whole new world. Well, at the time it was for me. And I was like, this is great, dude. Like, I know this guy. Like, I don't get too pumped. And then like, I remember when you guys announced those Japan shows a couple of years ago and everybody was like flipping out. And I was like, yeah, Taken's tight. And people are like, oh, you know who they are? I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh, tight. Like, Ray has this podcast. And I'm like, yeah, I know Ray. And people are like, you're like the metalcore dude. Like, how do you know Ray? Like, you what? Like, and I'm like, what do you mean? That first off, that's like the most ignorant statement ever. Like,
I pay attention, right?
yeah. And I was like, second off, like, that's he's tight. Like, but also like, I always joke on the show, like, we've had episodes talking about like my history from like a child. Like, I've had a lot of guests from. I mean, I've been doing this. This is 16 years now, Ray. Yep. Like, and so I've had guests from, but like. I may always make the joke that there's still a few people in the world of the music industry that don't know me as JoelCupcake or Joel Haston. They just know me as like Big Joel or Joel from Santa Cruz. And like, you're on that list. Like, you probably, if someone brings me up in conversation, I just imagine you going like, oh yeah, Joel from Santa Cruz, you know, like there's not a lot of bands left. Like, everyone just calls me by my later names now, you know what I mean? And so it's cool to have someone that, literally I go back that far with.
Yeah, no, it is special because I think that, I mean, honestly, that's what makes the whole thing that we're involved in, the DIY punk hardcore community. And I try not to wax nostalgic too much because I never want to feel like it's like, oh, this era was the best, because that's stupid. Like, what we're experiencing right now is the best, like for a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old. And even though like we're clearly not in that demographic, it's still important for us to be like, we're still engaged. We still care about this. Like, you know, you work with bands and you manage bands and you are incredibly involved with making sure your finger is as on the pulse as humanly possible, not just from a musical perspective on like how we can make money, but like, I want to do this show because I love this band. I love Turnstile. So of course I'm going to have them up here. So yeah, but I think that's what makes the whole thing special, because once you've been involved for over, you know, whatever, 5 to 7 years, like you have to, it takes effort to still continue to be involved. And I think that's what makes it all worthwhile, because you feel that connect, like you and I could meet today and just be like, oh wait, you're that, like, oh yeah. And then we would immediately connect. We have so much shared history, even though we, you know, like using this example, we may never have met before. And it's like, there is nothing cooler than be like, oh dude, we were at the same shows together or whatever. It's like, it's so great.
Well, and it's also interesting to me because, you know, when you talk to other people in the music industry, how they talk to you or how they address you or answer you or whatever. I've noticed that I'm on that list where I'm more on the, oh, you don't know Joel side. Like I'm the one when people don't know me, they're talk to weird instead of it being me talk to weird for not knowing somebody. Like I'll be like, oh yeah, I've worked with them, but like I don't know them. But then it's like I'll meet someone and they're like, yeah, I literally got told like I was an uneducated dummy or something like that because I didn't know you. And I'm like, well, that's not fair. I was like, it's the problem is that NorCal is just this own little bubble that hasn't been relevant since the Pound.
Sure.
You know, and I mean, you remember Palookaville and Santa Cruz as well, like way back in the day, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And like Salinas.
Yes. Jim Dandy's. Yep.
Dude, we played, I mean, I think the first time that we went to Northern California, I mean, we honestly played Jim Dandy's in Salinas, and this is taken probably 3 or 4 times. Like we played a lot because we just, I mean, we obviously knew the Fate 13 dudes and they always brought us up there, but I found it so transfixing, like how weird this place was. And I mean, not only the venue was weird, everything was weird about it, but then anytime you create something like that and kids show up, that's when it becomes like, we got to go back there, like as many times as humanly possible. Because like no matter what, there's 150 kids there. Everyone's stoked. It's super fun. And why would, I mean, at that time too, there wasn't really the notion of overplaying. You just did it. Oh, can we play this venue 7 times a month? Sure, let's do it.
Well, people always laugh. Like well, especially when I talk to like new promoters or like young people trying to break into the market, they're like, they like don't understand. Like I tell people like, dude, I used to book literally Salinas, Santa Cruz, San Jose. None of those drives is an hour apart. I could do the same show 3 days in a row with one different local opening each show, and each show would do 300-400 kids. Like I wish I could go back in time and live that now, because like I don't care about money, as we've taught you and I had discussed like kind of before the show. Like I love doing shows to just do shows. When I was like a 19-year-old kid doing shows, I had money like coming out my ears. I overpaid bands because I didn't know what I was doing, but I still had, the scene was so strong. I had all this money and I used literally none of it for my future. So
right, yeah, as a smart child does.
yeah, exactly. So, but you know, oh God, but okay, well, okay, so I got a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about today, right? So first off, you know, everybody checking out. I know, you know, the first like 20 minutes of the show is always the most listened to. So I want to make sure we do you a little bit of justice. Ray hosts an amazing podcast called 100 Words or Less, everybody. He actually just had a phenomenal guest. Growing up the punk rock kid that I did, a punk rock ska kid, he had Kevin Seconds from 7 Seconds on the show. Ray, how did you, we're going to like kind of go in reverse order.
That's fine.
How long have you been doing 100 Words now? And like, what do you love about it?
So I've been doing it now, this iteration, so 100 Words or Less, I've been doing it for almost 8 years, which is insane in the podcast world, because like people were like, oh my gosh, the podcast existed 8 years ago. It's like, yeah, it did. I did a different iteration of the show called First World Problems. Like if you go very far back in the feed, you'll be able to see like some of the first episodes are called First World Problems. Same sort of premise, different, little slightly different structure. But yeah, so I've been doing it for 8 years. And I mean, for one, it doesn't, similar to not probably, I can almost guarantee from your perspective of doing shows, like, you know, it doesn't feel like work. Like it feels like work adjacent, but not like work. And so since I have kind of developed a working relationship with so many different people in regards to like publicists, like it's really easy for me. Like, honestly, I usually have about 2 months of episodes recorded in advance because I'm just neurotic about that, because I never want to be at a spot where I feel like I'm behind, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get a guest this week or whatever. And
that's my life. That's my life. We're the complete opposite. Like, I'm just like,
shooting from the hip. Here
and every time I have people lined up to pre-record stuff, it's like, Northern California lights on fire again. Or or something. Someone travels, or I end up my work schedule flip flops. You know, like So it's hard, and I mean, I've been able to get it on rails to where that, and plus, I don't really have to. I mean, I reach out to people and like I get stuff done when I need to, but I don't necessarily feel the implication to just like completely dip into my friends all of the time to be like, oh, can you come on here and like help me out or whatever? Which is fine, because like that's what everybody needs to do. But yeah, so it's really rewarding for a multitude of reasons. One, I just feel like I'm doing an audio zine, where it's like it's documenting the punk and hardcore scene from all of these different people's perspectives, understanding that there's so many commonalities between all of our stories, but people have done so many different things with them. Two, the fact that, as adults, and I'm sure you experience this, like when you meet a new person and then you become friendly with them and you're like 35, what are you going to like, hey, can you fill me in the last like 34 years of your life? It's impossible. And so I love getting the feedback from people saying, I've known this person for 20 years or however long, and I did not know the things about them that they shared in the show. And I'm like, that's awesome. It's great because it's a service. Like it just gives people, And that's why I wanted you on the show, because I do everything like nothing's like an interview. Like it's Ray, I would imagine you haven't watched my first episode, which is completely fine. I explained the part of the reason I started the show is like a couple of years ago, I was out somewhere with some friends and we were talking and I made a joke or like a comment to somebody and they were like, I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh or not. And I was like, that's a weird out-of-pocket comment. Like, why would you say that to me? And they're like, well, like, are you being Joel right now? Or are you being like pin-up Joel, like promoter, like business Joel? And I was like, those are the same person. And like the person I was talking to was like you act a certain way when you're at a show. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm responsible for hundreds of kids in a room. And they were like, no, but like you have like a different persona. And like, you know, and this guy was, thank God, was proceeded to tell me that like to a lot of the younger kids and like new bands, I had this like unapproachable, like bitter old guy. Just like, it wasn't even like a persona, it was like a reputation. And I was like,
sure.
I was like, do you know that I'm probably the first person in this room you could just come up to and have a beer with, and we'd probably be best friends? Like,
yep, yeah.
I'm like, what you see is what you get. Like, I'm not, there's no layers here.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally. Yeah.
So that's why I started the show. And then like, I love your stuff as well, because it's like, it's all authentic. It's all real. Like it's so stripped away and it's not like flashy, you know? Like I can't listen to like all these podcasts with their super flashy intros and their segues to this and that. And like, you know, like I love all the wrestling stuff, for example. Like I still watch wrestling, but so many of those shows, it's like the episode's an hour long and there's 5 product placement ads read off by the host and all this stuff. And I understand you got to make your buck. I get it.
Totally.
But like, even like some of like the interviews, like it's also, it feels like it's all like so scripted and not genuine. And I don't want that.
Right. It's all based off of plugs and whatever. And like, again, that's part of the structure of it. But when you feel like you get to, whether or not you like the person's art or whatever it is that they're doing, if you walk away with understanding them just a little bit more, that's a win, you know? Like that's where you're like, I still hate their band or I still hate their art, but now I know where they're coming from a little bit more. And that's like really important. You
know, you hit that explanation right on the head. Like, because there's so many people where I'm like, oh, I know you now. Like, yeah, we cool. Still not going to book your band, but we cool. Like,
right. Yeah. And even if you go the extra mile where like you are booking them, you're like, I'm booking them out of the fact that I can't get into your music at all, but there's enough there for me to feel a connective tissue with you to be like, yeah, let's do a show together. Because like, you know, whatever, you got into Pennywise when you were 13 years old or whatever, like that there's enough for you to be able to feel like you actually have a connection with, as opposed to, and I'm sure you've experienced this where it's like, you know, you get asked to book certain bands, or like, you know, publicists have taken certain people to me where it's like, this is no shots fired, but like, you know, it's like, hey, do you want to have like Kellen from Sleeping with Sirens on your show? For one, I mean, I've never met Kellen. I don't know him beyond what I've seen on the cover of AP or whatever. Yeah. But I'm like, I know enough about his history to know that it's like, you know, he really wasn't like a Chain Reaction kid or anything like that. Like, it was like, you know, he had some connective tissue to obviously independent music, but like, I just didn't feel like I was going to be able to bring anything to the table that would be able to connect with him besides all the stuff he's been asked a million other times. And I'm like, I just say no. And that's fine, because this is ultimately my decision, in the same way that it's your decision to not book these certain bands, where it's like,
exactly,
it would be tempting for you to be like, oh yes, like I can do this because like I know this will guarantee a certain amount of, you know, income or awareness or whatever it is you're looking for. But then it's like, well, is this actually going to be meaningful to me, or is this just something I'm doing? You know? Exactly.
Like there's, you know, like there's a lot of the whole, you know, over the years, I've booked so many shows where it's like, I'm just doing the agent a favor. And like, you know, this after post COVID, I'm not really doing that because I don't care. Right. Like there's no other way to say it. Like there's certain people where it's like, I like them, so I'll do them the favor. But like on paper, oh shit, dude, someone on my size, I have I don't have anybody standing over my shoulder helping me, you know? Like my name is all I have. So when it comes to time for me to ask for favors to be called in, 9 times out of 10, I just get ignored, you know? Right. Yeah. So, you know, I'm going to be more selective, you know, and, you know, I had a realization last year that I'm hard to work with for some of these agents, because I'm used to MySpace. I'm used to you texting me, hey, Joel, you want to book Taken? This is how much money we want. And I'm like, yeah, here you go, Ray. Sure. Yeah, let's boom. Like that's like I keep telling this story. Like one of my friends, Daniel DeFont, he books a lot of death metal. Yep. You know, we actually booked at one of the last shows Penup did before the pandemic. We booked the tour over text message when I was drunk.
Perfect. And
so the band, the show ends, blah, 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 blah. Like they come up to settle. And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to pay you. Like, don't you have an itinerary? And they're like, what? We didn't bring a TM this tour. And I was like, Okay. They're like, don't you have a contract? And I just laughed.
Right.
I was like,
that's not how we roll.
I was like, guys, I'm old school. I don't sign contracts. Like, I probably shouldn't put that out there on the internet, but I am now. Like, you know, it doesn't matter if I'm paying a band $10,000. I won't sign the contract. I just won't. I don't care. Like, too many nightmare scenarios with that. And yeah, it's lost me some business. Whatever, you know.
Right.
But you know, like, I'm like, yeah. So I had to, you know, Dan lives in Texas, so I'm blowing him up at like, you know, 2 a.m. his time. Like, hey, we shouldn't do this anymore. And he's like, what? I'm like, if we're gonna confirm a show over the phone, you know, you should check my level of sobriety. And he just started laughing, and he's like, I fucking hate you. All right, like, this is what you got to pay everybody. You know, we had a good laugh about it, but it was just like, I was like, but that's how I am. That's how I'm used to operating. Is like, it's all the friends and what you love, like. You know, I know there are people that get into the business because they see it as a career, and that's tight. But if you don't enjoy what you do, you're not. It
becomes a job, and I mean, that's fine. Like you said, there's no shots against people that want to work in the music industry and pursue that as an overarching idea, and then fall into these different pockets. But there definitely comes a point where you have to figure out what route you're going to go. Whether it's like, I'm just working with something that I'm passionate about, and that's what I'm going to stick to. Or if I'm going to work with something that I'm less passionate about, but then find some sort of, you know, careerist idea, which again, there's no problem with that. That's just, you really have to diverge at that point and figure out what's important for you.
Yeah. So with your podcast, what's like, can you give me a rundown? Cause you have a lot of episodes. You've been doing this a long time.
Like 400 episodes. Yeah.
What can you give me like your top like 3 or 5, like just guests? You don't have to go into detail, but who are like,
so there's, I was really proud of the conversation I had years ago with Davey Havoc, just because it was, I mean, everybody knows him and everybody has an opinion of him, but like the way that we were able to have our conversation was very much like, just hilarious stuff where it's like, dude, the only band you've ever been in is AFI. And that's weird. And he's like, yeah, it's really weird. So just like being able to articulate certain things that no one typically talks to him about, because like, you know, they just are caring about Dream Car, whatever the newest thing that he's doing. So I was really proud of that conversation because he just was very, you know, open and transparent as like, you know, a hardcore kid to a hardcore kid, because ultimately that's what we view ourselves as. So I was really proud of that one. I was stoked I had so John K. Sampson from the Weaker Thans and Propaganda. I had to jump through hoops. Like he is a notoriously press shy dude. And like they're signed to Epitaph. And like, I mean, they haven't put out Weaker Thans haven't put out a new record in forever. And John K. Sampson puts out his solo stuff, but just one of my favorite musicians of all time. Had to like it was like for years I was trying to get him on the show, and then finally my wife was like, hey, you've had Chris from Propaganda on, would you maybe like, would that he connect you? And I was like, sure, I'll try that. He did. Basically, it was like I emailed John K. Sampson. He wrote back and he was like, yeah, write me in 6 months because my house is getting redone. I was like, okay. And then like literally 6 months of the day, I was like, hey, what's up, man? Like, are you interested? And he was totally great. And like he had, I mean, I wasn't interviewing in a press cycle or anything like that. Yeah. But it was such a, it was so interesting because the first 10 or 15 minutes, like he was nervous because he hadn't done this.
He doesn't do this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was fun for me to kind of make him comfortable with the idea that like, dude, I just love your stuff and I want to know more about you. And so I was really happy and proud of that one just because it took like, I mean, it was literally like 2 years for me to try to like navigate that world. I also really, really enjoy getting people who are not ostensibly on the outside connected to our world, like what I like to call secret punks. So like there's this really, really popular podcast called 99% Invisible, hosted by this guy named Roman Mars. Arguably one of like the OGs of the podcast ecosystem, as it were. And he was able to build this whole like independent network of podcasts. He's just done like when Kickstarter was early, he was like one of the most successful Kickstarters from a podcast perspective. Anyways, he has all these rad credentials, and his show is about basically architecture and, really interesting deep dives into all of these things that are, just common in the world. But it's like, hey, you should always stop and read the sign at a building because you don't know what that will reveal to you, and then you'll learn all about this particular cool thing. Anyways, he just kind of in like, you know, interviews and other places, he's kind of sprinkled some sort of punk rock knowledge where it's been like, oh, he's mentioned like Dead Kennedys and Black Flag. Like, I have a feeling this guy knows what's up. And then I hit him up independently, and he was like, oh yeah, I'd love to talk about music. Cause I you know, the way that I approach people is very much like, I don't want to talk to you about like architecture or your thing. Like, I will talk about your thing, but not about your thing. I want to know about you, similar to what you're doing here. And yeah, exactly. So then he came on the show. It was amazing because it was like, he talked about like Discord being his favorite label and how he modeled everything he has done in his life professionally around that idea and that DIY notion. Tons of connections with him, punk and hardcore. And my favorite part, it was like, I don't know, 45, 50 minutes into the conversation, he just was like, what, like, wait, I'm straight edge. Like, it just was like, it was a realization. It was like a 45-year-old guy where it's just like, oh yeah, like I guess I'm still straight edge. Like I never really claimed it, but it was just so funny. Here's this guy, who's, you know, like again, no one on the outside would think that he has a connection.
Like a secret legend. Yeah,
dude, it's great. And so those are just off the top of my head. Those are some really fun, and that's why I like being able to show that even if you have been, you know, doing something completely different than like working in the music industry, working at a record label, playing in a band or whatever, you can still have all this connective tissue that you have learned from all those stupid, sweaty rooms you've been in where you're like, oh yeah, like treating people ethically, like that's a good thing. And like you take it forward into your life, and it's so cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to interject with the story. You brought up Davey Havoc. I love Davey. I love getting to tell this story. Everybody, you remember the band. Everybody in the area, my local area, remembers the band Moria. Of course, Steve, the bass player, lived with me for a couple of years, so I'm really close with a lot of those dudes. I booked, you know, I never did a lot of hardcore when I was younger. Like we had another guy, you know, Spencer from At Risk, Bitascombe. You know, he did most of hardcore shows when I was starting to do the metalcore shows. So we just kind of like kept it a little separate. Wasn't a big deal, you know. I got hit up. We had like 4 promoters all team up. Do you remember when like Ash started TKO booking and like really ramped up the presentation of our style of music? And they did that Firestorm Fest with Earth Crisis.
Of course.
It was like Earth Crisis, Terror, Shy Halud, Recon, Down to Nothing.
Definitely remember that. Yep.
There's one other band I'm forgetting, but it doesn't matter. So I was like, shit, like I was the dude that did shows at the 418 or the Vets Hall. You know, you want me to get a room that holds almost 1,000 people to do this tour? Like, so me and a bunch of promoters, we like 4-way teamed up on it. Long story short, we did it at the legendary Phoenix Theater in Petaluma. Oh yeah. Which most people listening, if you don't know this, AFI, specifically Davey, is actually from this like little tiny middle of nowhere town in way up in Northern California, near Petaluma. I'm not going to rat him out and say what it is because you can use Google, but he came to the show, and like, I don't fanboy. Like even at that stage of my career, like that was still probably my first 6-8 years of being a promoter. It was like very hard for me to fanboy about anything, or fangirl, not, you know, want to be inclusive with the term. And I was like, fuck, Davey's at my show. Holy shit. Blah, 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 blah. Never said a word to him. Like, I wanted to, but I was like, you know, he wants to be here he paid. He showed up and paid for the show.
Of course, dude. Like, he's going to mosh to Earth Crisis. That's absolutely right.
Okay. So that's where I'm getting. Yep. So we're down there. The show took a minute to fill up. It finally filled up. Show did pretty well. We only lost a little bit of money. I don't care about that though. That was an experience. Like, I mean, I can say I booked freaking Earth Crisis. You know what I mean? Right. Like, and Shy Halud, Matt Fox will ever be like top 10 people in the music industry to me. Like, just that quirky old nerd guy. Like, I love him. But so we do the show. Earth Crisis starts playing. They start playing Firestorm. All right. I'm like in the pit. I'm gonna watch the band, you know, from there, like instead of my little promoter perch, you know. And no joke, Davey Havoc just comes running right by me into the pit. Steve from Moria is moshing. Davey spin kicks and almost just takes his head off, and then you know, swings back and hits him right in the gut. And I immediately see Steve pop up, not knowing who it is. And he just goes to swing at the dude. And I just I have never had to restrain my own friend at a show. And I just like like from a movie, like a bouncer movie, like arms back, and I just like yanked him backwards. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. Steve, if that's not how it went down, I apologize. And I was like, that's Davey Havoc. And he's like, oh, I almost got knocked out by Davey Havoc. And I was like, no, you almost got knocked out by Davey Havoc at my show. And we both just were like, this is tight. Yeah, like, that was the end of that was like the end of the experience. Davey left. I didn't say a word to him. Like, but what am I going to do? Hey, man, I put on the show. It's rad. You're here. I love your band. No, that's awkward. You just wanted to come and enjoy a night of hardcore.
Yeah. Oh, dude. He anytime Earth Crisis plays the greater Southern California area, he will always be there. He will always be singing, moshing so hard. Like, you know, he's moshing like he's 18 years old, even though
it's literally, I don't use this adjective very much. It's ludicrous. Like seeing him at a show like that is actually ludicrous because you're like, right.
He should like. Yeah, like he shouldn't ostensibly be doing that, but like I mean, it's just so great because like that's forever locked into that mental framework of like, this is who I am, and this will always be who I am because this is so important to the core of my being, and it's just like, that's great. It's like he'll add all these different layers as he grows older and as he does all of these wild, crazy things, and it's just like, it's great, man. You're able to travel in so many circles and then ultimately still be a straight edge hardcore kid that loves Earth Crisis.
Dude, I love it. Yeah, literally. And like, I mean, you know, everything he does with like his other projects now too. It's just like, and to hear that he just comes and circles back to Earth Crisis, like I love it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All he does is add different layers and just like, you know, I like to say that we contain multitudes, and that's exactly what we do. We all just add different layers to our, you know, being, our interests, and like, I mean, well, that's ideally what you should do. Like, you shouldn't just be stuck in a certain thing and just only being that thing. Like, you know, I don't, you know, you follow me on socials. I don't talk about pop punk. You know, I missed that movement. Let's just put it delicately. Sure. But I am a sucker. Like, I don't know where it is. I literally have a framed picture of the actual photo of the Blue Skies album cover by the Ataris. So we got the book down a few years ago, and everybody was like, "Oh, like this is cool. Who's this band?" Some people didn't know, some people did, some people were stoked. But like, I am always like in the shadows, or like a stage, a stage potato as they call them these days at my shows. You know, I was like up front crying, like singing with Chris Rowe, and everybody was like, "That was really cool to see you enjoy a show." I think like, also, you like the Ataris? I'm like, who doesn't? Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you listened to Blue Skies? Right.
Yeah, dude, that record is like that, and So Long Astoria. Like, I'm sorry, like everyone's heard their Bob Dylan cover. You know what I mean? Wait, yeah, it's Bob Dylan, right? Yeah. I'm not.
The Don Henley.
Sorry, Don Henley. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I was like,
Boys of Summer. Yeah, no,
Boys of Summer. Yeah.
He used to. I dated a girl that lived in Santa Barbara. Like, this is when I was in high school. She was older, so then she went to Santa Barbara for college, and so I would always go up and visit her. Thankfully, my mom was permissive, and she allowed me to do that and have sleepovers. But he worked at a record store and I'm totally blanking on the name of the store, but he worked at a record store up in Santa Barbara, and like you would go in there and you should be like, oh, there's Chris Rowe. This was like, it was after, you know, Blue Skies, so, you know, well known, but he just worked at a record store. That was always funny.
Dude, I love that. I love that. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk about high school, Ray. Like, how did you? So you're older than me, you know, but you also
40 years old. Yes.
Yeah. So you're 5 years older than me. You got into like relatively, like if we both go back in time, you got into hardcore at a much younger age than I did. I think. I'm not gonna say that that's for sure.
Yeah, I got into it. Like, I mean, my trajectory of getting into independent-minded music was, you know, not too dissimilar to a lot of people. Like, I didn't get into it via skateboarding, even though skateboarding, like, you know, I tried to do it, but I wasn't good at it. So I never like went down that road. But it was, you could not live in Southern California and not be exposed to all of the, you know, because whatever, being 40 years old in the early 90s, like it was, you know, bands like Offspring and Green Day were inescapable, especially because we had such a good radio station in the form of K-Rock. And, you know, I got into like Rage Against the Machine and all of that stuff via, it wasn't necessarily K-Rock, but it was 120 Minutes on MTV. I just remember watching those videos that were played that were obviously not played during the daytime because there's no way that they could play Killing in the Name during the day. So
yeah, for those of you young people watching the show,
videos, right?
MTV did not start like they did an hour of music videos when they first started. It was all like pop culture and like it was everything but music on a music television channel, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And then it like progressed into more and more and more actual music.
Yeah, it knows. It's wild. And it's funny too, because the CEO of iHeart is a guy named Bob Pittman. He started MTV. And it's just like, it's so sick to hear him tell just these little nuggets of stories in like our, you know, all hands meetings and stuff, to be like, he started MTV, dude. Like, why are you still working? It's so crazy. You're like, you started something that is like so culturally significant, and, you know, you still care about this. You still care about media. But yeah, anyways. But yeah, definitely like MTV radio, huge in my like, you know, early teens.
Yeah.
And then, you know, getting into the, you know, Epiphat scene, that was inescapable, you know, Rancid, all that sort of stuff. And then I distinctly remember, because there obviously record stores, you know, were plentiful back in the early 90s and mid 90s. And yes, I picked up the first Victory Style compilation. And that was like, yeah, that was my introduction to, you know, straight edge hardcore. Like I had heard Minor Threat and I had heard Descendants. I had heard stuff that was a little bit like harder edge than everything that I was just talking about. But it wasn't until I got into those bands, Strife, Earth Crisis, you know, Dead Guy, Guilt, like everything that Victory was doing. Like once I found that label, I worshiped at their altar. Like there, I so distinctly remember it was like probably 1 or 2 Christmas holidays, I basically gave my mom the Victory catalog with all this stuff circled, where I was like, Mom, can you just order all this stuff for me so I can unwrap a Earth Crisis long sleeve in front of my grandma? It's like, it was just, what am I doing? But I was so stoked on that.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, yeah, that was my trajectory. And then it was probably around 15 or 16 when I started to like actually go to hardcore shows. Like, I mean, the first hardcore show that I went to by myself without like, you know, my parents dropping me off or whatever was at the Showcase Theater in Corona, California, which I know you're well aware of.
Rest in power.
Exactly.
To California's longtime friend.
Legendary venue. But yeah, it was Strife, Sick of It All. I want to say actually AFI played it too. And then I think I may have been Good Riddance. I'm misremembering, but regardless, like that was the first show that I went to like independently, because I loved Strife, and it was like Strife was so huge to me. Like, I'll never forget. It was like watching them. It was like them and Voodoo Glow Skulls, the Glass House in Pomona, California, and Rick Rodney.
That's a weird lineup,
dude. That was Strife. Like Strife would play with anybody, and they went over well with everybody, even though they were fully X'd up and like, you know, we're very confrontational about straight edge, like not in a violent way, but just like, we're straight edge, you should know it.
Yeah, no, I know about straight edge because of that band,
dude, for sure. And but I remember Rick Rodney, the vocalist of Strife, was, you know, I was up front for Strife, just waiting for them. And then Rick Rodney was like, he turns around to the people in the front row and he was like, does anybody have a Sharpie? Like he needed to X up, and I had a Sharpie, and I was like, here you go, Rick, here's your Sharpie. And he X'd up, and then he gave it back to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the coolest. This is the pinnacle that I'll ever experience in the music industry. Or not even, I wouldn't even call it the industry, just the show going.
Yeah.
Like, so but yeah, that was so that was my trajectory. And then, as you well know, once you open up the rabbit hole, it was just, but the thing that I'm really grateful about is the fact that I didn't feel like I necessarily needed to stick to one lane, where it was like, even though I will always self-identify as a hardcore kid, I would go to punk shows, or I'd go to ska shows. And a lot of that was definitely a symptom of the 90s in general. Yeah. But like being able to, you know, once I started to like book shows, being able to, you know, go to places like Coos Cafe and see such a wide variety of bands, and then obviously getting into, you know, emo and indie and seeing all of these things, but feeling home at every single one of these shows, even though, you know, at a Get Up Kid show, I'd be wearing whatever, an Earth Crisis shirt. And like at an Earth Crisis show, I'd be wearing a Get Up Kid shirt. What, like those are all fine. And I felt, I was really thankful that I was able to do that, because it just broadened my musical horizons much more, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I miss those days. And like, I'm a big fan of the like lots of bands, lots of genres, and kids are not as receptive to it these days. And it like bums me out. Like, I mean, I remember when I was young, it came to the Pound. You probably remember the tour. I don't remember the second band. Okay. But it was the freaking tour, which made no sense at all, was Terror.
Okay.
BT Bam.
Oh, sure.
Someone else, and Stretch Armstrong opened.
Yeah.
Like, what is a pop punk band doing? Okay, I consider Stretch Armstrong a pop punk band. I know they're like a hardcore. They toe the line. But
pop punk adjacent.
But what the hell is Stretch Armstrong doing opening for BT Bam? Like, I was like, I wish I could remember the fourth band on that bill. It was like probably Every Time I Die or Scarlet, one of those two bands. I feel like.
Yeah, no, that's very appropriate. But no, I like it definitely was. I mean, I remember a tour that actually we played the Pound. It was taken Between the Buried and Me, Alexis on Fire, and It Dies Today. And that was like our first real national tour. And that was like probably 2001. And it was so cool because like us and Alexis on Fire were melodic. And then obviously you had It Dies Today and Between the Buried and Me. Because this Between the Buried and Me, we were talking like self-titled record, you know, like this was pre-Silent Circus. And It Dies Today had only had their first EP out.
I was gonna say, was that OG It Dies Today?
Oh, dude, this was you know, forever stored.
So like quite possibly the greatest metalcore band of all time. Yes,
that 6-song EP, like, I mean, it was like we were so excited because all the like, even though we were friends with Alexis and we knew the It Dies Today guys, we didn't know the BT Bam guys at all, but it was like everybody got along so swimmingly well, and it was like one of the most fun tour. Like, I distinctly remember for It Dies Today, Nick, the vocalist, we would actually, because they were so, you know, over the top and ignorant in regards to their mosh parts, and of course every good singer has mosh call outs, we would give him ridiculous call outs. Like, we would just be like, all right, let's see how far Nick can get away with this. And there was one where I don't know why I remember this, but like in Reno, we were like, dude, how about you just say, like, you know, before one of your breakdowns, like, you know, punch each other's dicks off. And then it was just like, punch each other's dicks off. And we all were losing our minds because,
oh my God,
it was so good. But yeah.
Have you ever seen, okay, I have to bring this up because you're like one of the only people that might actually remember and will think it's funny. Have you ever seen that fucking, like, it's not a meme, it's like a straight up flyer, and it's Scott Vogel for president?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Oh my God. Okay, I need to text my friend Brandon because I think he's the one who originated this. Is like back in the MySpace days. It was like Scott Vogel for president. Somebody took the Terror logo and like it's a picture of Scott, like, you know, doing his jump on stage with the mic, and they made everything red, white, and blue.
Okay.
And all of the selling points on why you should vote for Scott Vogel for president were all, I mean, you know the term. Okay, yeah, I was gonna say not everybody gets that. All the selling points were like Vogelisms, like is one with the underdogs. We'll help you push your problems away. I was like, oh my God, like Brilliant. I love it. I mean, to this day, like, Scott is one of the best frontmen that gets me pumped up. But at the same time, I love when he's like, get the fuck up here. This mic's your mic. This stage is your stage. You know, get on the mic, sing the part. This song's called, you know, called Keep Your Mouth Shut. I'm like, but you
wait, hold on.
I'm like, you just fuck.
That's a contradiction in terms, my friend. But we're fine. We're fine.
Or when he's like, everybody pile up here, we're gonna play Push It Away. And I'm like, but you, Scott, damn it. All right.
Yeah.
I'll try to find that picture for you, Ray, and send it to you because you'll die, dude.
No, it's great. When they had the Vogelism's website where you could just refresh and a new Vogelism would pop up. I remember it because I of course had him on the podcast, you know, years ago, and I asked him about that. I was like, you know, how do you feel about that? And he was like, yeah, it's kind of, you know, he's like, I mean, he just kind of brushed it away, but you know, you could tell that he, in some respects, I'm sure thought it was funny because it's like, dude, the reason that people do this about you is because you are unbelievable at what you do. Like,
you're fucking Scott Vogel. You know what I mean? Like,
it totally, no, for sure. He's I mean, one for the ages. Like, every band that he's ever played in, where you're just like, you're great. Like, you do it across the board in everything that you've played in, from Despair all the way to World Be Free. It's like, it's great. It's all great.
You brought up Despair. I didn't expect we're
no,
old now, Ray. We're old now.
Oh, dude, yeah, whatever, man. You can throw any irrelevant metalcore band at me, and I'll be like, oh yeah, let's talk about that full length for 2 hours.
Oh my god, yeah. So the first time, oh god, I can talk to you about this band. You're like the only guest I've ever had that we can talk about this band. You want to know who got me into metalcore and hardcore, Ray?
Let's go.
I was crushing hard in high school on this girl.
Okay.
Her name was Hillary.
Okay.
She and I had a common interest in the Nerve Agents.
Oh, of course, dude. Eric Ozian.
Dude,
Yeah.
I found out I listened to TSOL, and someone was like, oh, they're kind of like a goth punk band. I had never heard that classification before. Because in Santa Cruz, everything was just punk or skater punk. There was no subgenres. Like in Santa Cruz growing up, that's what it was. It was like, oh yeah, it's thrash, metal, punk, or skater punk. Like even growing up, I didn't know the word. I didn't hear the word hardcore music till I was like in high school. So I heard about this band called The Origins from TSOL. I met this girl. We were crushing hard. So we talked about Nerve Agents. We went and saw them together. We both did an exchange trip to France. Okay. And so, I'm on the plane with her and I'm like, I need to just do whatever I can to impress this lady. You know what I mean? Which, by the way, this never worked out in my favor, but that's not the point. And she was like, hey, well, I brought some other music on the plane. Like, if you get bored, like, I'll give you some stuff to listen to I think you'd really like. And I was like, okay, whatever. So, like, and I'm like, Nerve Agents, if you've never listened to Nerve Agents, folks, I can't express how wonderful that band is.
Just listen to Days of the White Owl. That full length is just like, I mean, all their stuff is great, but that Days of the White Owl and the Butterfly Collection for that matter, but still
both are. Days of the White Owl though is like, that's like top five punk records for me for sure.
Oh, it's great. Absolutely.
And so she's showing me this music. I didn't like a lot of this stuff she showed me. And then she fucking slides me Poison the Well, man.
Oh, why do your eyes paralyze me?
Yeah, and I was just like, that's it. Like, I'm out. I'm out.
I loved. I mean that particular era too. That ushered in, whatever the 99 to 2003, where it's like obviously so many of those bands were able to reach beyond the typical person that would like attend a hardcore show, and obviously, a lot of this was also tied up with the advent of the internet and that becoming more, present in most people's lives. But being having those touch point bands where you can play a Poison the Well and a person would understand it better than just listening to like a totally, dissonant hardcore band, like where they're just like, I don't get any of this. And I loved that all like so many of those bands were able to bring the scene to like such high levels that, if they didn't exist, then it would have maybe taken longer to get there or whatever. But yeah, I love that era for sure. Yeah.
I saw a retweet the other day. I think it was actually yesterday. It was some, there's a lot of young kids into hardcore and punk right now, which I think is amazing.
Yep.
And one of them goes, I just learned the most mind blowing fact. She used some in-depth adjective like that, like big adjective. She's like, that, the band that we're used to seeing play stadiums, Avenged Sevenfold, used to play garage shows with all your favorite hardcore bands. And I was like, we're officially to that point where like the gap is larger than I thought. Because I remember when Avenged Sevenfold was one of the better like mainstream metalcore bands, and now they're nothing like that at all. But that's not the point.
Right. But they're like a mainstream rock band, but like that was like always the vision and trajectory of where they wanted to ultimately end up. Like it just happened to be that they were, metal and punk kids from Huntington Beach or whatever. But their vision was always like, we're going to be playing in front of 10,000 people as opposed to 50 at Coos Cafe with a smoke machine. And like, people were like, who are all these posers? Like, this is stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's it. And it is interesting to look at those different, inflection points for people at certain eras to be like, I honestly, it's like, I think about this in regards to straight edge too, because people using Davey, it sounds like we're like Davey worship here, but like there are people who their sole exposure to straight edge was specifically because of Davey Havoc or specifically because of CM Punk, where it's like, people of a certain era were like, what do you mean you didn't hear about straight edge via Minor Threat or whatever? Or like anything Youth of Today, like, but that, like, of course, like that makes total sense where this is this person's inflection point as opposed to anything else of a different era. And like, if you don't have those things where it's like, you know, have heart, it's like, that's great. Like if you hear about straight edge via have heart and you're 13 years old, sick.
Great.
Like,
yeah.
Great. Like we'll welcome you in with open arms. And I think that, to your point, that's exactly the same way as like, you know, getting hit with Poison the Well at a certain time, getting hit with that at the right age. It's great.
And I don't think people realize like how much of an impression that really can leave in your brain. So like, are you familiar with Sean Mott? Do you know who that is?
Sean who?
Sean Mott.
He's a
straight edge guy from the East Coast. He does the Metalcore Nerds podcast that I'm on a lot. He's a graphic designer. He played in that band Ghost Ship for a little bit.
Oh, of course. Yes, I do remember that band.
Yes. So Ghost X Ship, to be specific. Right. Yeah, he was the guitar player. So him and we always have this like ludicrous, well, it's not ludicrous, it is ludicrous argument. So like my inflection point was Poison the Well, as I said to you. So for example, one of the great like post metalcore records, I guess we could say, of the generation is generally considered Define the Great Line by Underoath, right?
Oh, great. Yeah.
Okay. I can't listen to that record because to me, the first metalcore band that graduated to mature music was Poison the Well. Yeah. So when I hear Define the Great Line, even though they sound nothing alike, it's them ripping off.
It's a pale version of what you deem to be the record that you got introduced to.
Totally. Yeah, it's to me, it's just them ripping off. Oh gosh, it's just them ripping off You Come Before You. You know what I mean? And I'm like, Poison the Well did it first and did it better. And people are like, dude, that record sounds nothing like Define the Great Line. And I'm like, yeah, but if you listen to everything Underoath did before that record, like, do you see what they're like, Joel, 1,000 bands have made that switch. And I'm like, you're not getting it. Like, Poison the Well was the first, them and 18 Visions. Okay, both did the drastic sound change. But I think PTW did it first, right? I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Vanity was obviously the biggest shift for 18V, and that was probably, I mean, it was definitely around the same era. I don't know year-wise, like 2003, 2004. But yeah, still, it's funny because Define the Great Line for me, I basically looked at them being like, okay, we love bands like Neurosis and Isis. We'll never be as cool as them, but we want to incorporate like how dark that record is for where they were at in their career and making that huge sonic shift. Yeah. That's what I attribute it to more so than that. I mean, of course, they were clearly influenced by Poison. Like, there's no bones about that.
Yeah.
But listening to the record, I was like, oh, I see. You guys wanted to take this, you know, even further down the rabbit hole of being like, and this is no shots against, you know, Underoath, but being like, showing their homework to bands like Isis to be, because I know for a fact that Underoath, like after they, you know, were obviously on the trajectory of being, you know, one of the largest bands in that scene, they were asking bands like Cult of Luna and Isis to tour with them because they're like, we'll be able to expose you to this huge audience and it'll be great for you guys. And like bands like Isis were like, we're good, man. And like, not because they're like, we're better than your fans, but they're just like, this just doesn't make sense for us.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
And so, but to your point, I think it really all depends on like the lens that you're viewing it through, you know, and like what.
Very fair point.
But you're very right, where it's like this shift between records that bands make. It's like, you know, Cave In can be, you know, pointed to directly, where it's just like, oh, here's this, and then now they're a space rock band. Like, I guess that's what we're doing. But you know, like they were able to telegraph that in between with the Creative Eclipses EP. Where you could have like a little sense of like, okay, they're not going heavier, they're going softer. Yeah. So I need to be ready for this. But like Underoath obviously didn't do that. They were just like, hey, we're going to be even darker and heavier, but yet more melodic.
Yeah. So, yeah. See, and I'm a sucker. Like, I don't like to talk to people about Underoath because, you know, the Changing of Times is the only Underoath record.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that is the definitive record for sure. Yes.
For the people listening, if you haven't figured it out, I have a giant black hole of weakness in my heart for keyboard breakdowns. If anybody hasn't figured that out, like I've talked about Horse the Band on this show so many times. Now we're talking about Underoath. Everyone knows my history with Arsonists. Like, you know, if you know, like Winds of Plague. Like, dude, Johnny, I love that guy. Yeah, like I don't care.
Keyboarded it, I'm good.
Yeah, I don't like, you know, young Joel, when I found out about When's the Plague, I was like, oh, this is heavy and angry, and there's a keyboard.
Yeah,
oh,
tell
dude,
me more.
like, let's rip, dude. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah. I love that band's. I had a guest on here. Who was it? It was somebody from like a metal band. We talked about When's the Plague, and I blew their mind by explaining to him. Do you remember their old name, Ray? Do you remember?
December something or other.
A bleak December.
There you go. Yeah,
and I was like,
because Andrew, the bassist, was at Taken shows being like, here, dude, can we play with you? And it was like, you know, I was like, who? Of course, like, no, like I don't have that much pull to like get you on all of our shows.
Yeah.
But I'll take this. But yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what happened so many times where it's like you just totally. I mean, I didn't write the band off, but I just didn't take anything seriously because it's just a kid giving you a demo at a show, like completely unprofessionally. And of course, years later, I made fun of Andrew for it, where I was just like. Yeah. And then he turned the tables on me. He's like, do you remember I gave you demos? I was just like, oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. You were not called When's the Plague at that time. But yes, I do remember.
Yes. You're like, that was when you had that other band name. Like,
oh, yeah, exactly. Well, it's like I mean, you know, everybody has to do that. Everybody has to play. I mean, in my opinion, you have to, you know, if your first band is like really good right away, it's like, I almost don't trust you. Where I'm like, I don't know about that.
Again, not to be a fanboy, but back to Davey Havoc. How is AFI your only band? Like,
it's because I mean, clearly, if you listen to, you know, Answer That and Stay Fashionable and their most recent release, like that's like 20 bands in between. So, but the fact that it's still called AFI is
not wrong. I remember when, oh, Jesus, what was it? The album after Art of Drowning. Why am I having a brain fart on what it's called? Sing the Sorrow.
Oh, okay.
Sing the Sorrow. I remember when that came out and people were like, turn their backs. No, this is the AFI. I'm like, there's a breakdown. What are you talking about? Like, how do you like Davey just asked for 60 extras to hardcore dance in their video. Like, they're exposing the culture to the mainstream audience. Like, what, how are you upset? Like, what?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Some people don't like change, Joel.
I still listen to the only album I can't get into that they did is Crash Love.
So yeah, a lot of people drop off there, but you know, that's it.
But the new stuff, the Blood Record or whatever, the last, not the most recent one. I actually thought it was really good. But I'm also, you know, I'm a sucker for Nine Inch Nails. So anytime Davey does anything even remotely similar to Nine Inch Nails, I'm like, just inject it into my body, please.
Tell me more.
Like,
yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So, well, dude, Ray, that is so. You know, you started going to shows. When did Taken happen? Like, what's the truth? How did that happen? How was being like in the OC scene? And you got to like, I love talking to the Fate 13 guys because they're like, oh yeah, all the bands that these kids are all stoked on now, like we grew up playing with. Like, you existed in such a rare and lucky hemisphere.
Totally.
Of bands.
And, being in Orange County. Yeah. So Taken started. The first band I played in was Doom Society. It was, of course, terrible. You can easily close your eyes and hear what we sounded like, which was just a bad punk band. But the drummer of Taken was in that, and the bassist, Nick, that now plays in Circus Survive, was also in it because we all went to high school together. And so that Taken officially, I think we started practicing in like 98 or so. And then 99 is when we actually like played our first show at Showcase with Adamantium and A Day in the Life, which was like a terrible VOD ripoff. But
that your first show was with Adamantium?
Dude, we were thrilled. I mean, yeah, it was. Of course, we were like 1 of 5. Like, you know, we were just.
Yeah, but who cares? Like, how? That's
totally was so thrilled. And this was like. I don't think they were just playing off of their demo still. I don't think they had released their first 7-inch. It was very early on in their band life. But so 99, basically we were most active 99 99 to 2004. And it was just so cool to exist, obviously, in the Orange County scene as all of those bands started to explode, because we for sure did not reach any levels of like, well, obviously we're like Bleeding Through and all those bands, but we were carving our own lane of just like, oh yeah, like we're not as heavy as these bands. We're not as like, you know, melodic as these other bands, but we were able to play with all of them and coexist. And then obviously draft off of not only their success, but then also just be able to create our own, like it was playing all of those shows with like, you know, just like a local show and drawing like 600 people to Chain Reaction when there was no touring bands, in the same way that you experienced that sort of stuff, where it's just like, oh dude, we got, Embrace the End and Arsonist Get All the Girls playing together. And it's just like, wow, we got 300 people showing up here. And I was like, wow,
thank you for mentioning literally the most underappreciated Northern California band of all time, Embrace the End. I don't know why. Like, I just,
dude, I literally signed them to Century Media. And
I remember.
Yeah, I know. And I still legitimately listen to those records, and I'm no shame in trying to get that band out to the world because they are still slay. But
I love Killing the Dream. Don't get me wrong.
Great.
But like Embrace the End should have come out on top. Like no disregard to Ceremony. You know, all those bands from that era that made it that are still here, I would trade all of them in for Embrace the End. I am so I don't even care if that gets me in some hot water. You know, give me Set It Straight back and give me Embrace the End back. Like, I will take both those bands over everyone else from that era. Like,
yeah, that you can completely wave that flag. I mean, I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that because those bands continue to exist, like, you know, Ceremony obviously still exists. So it's like, okay, this is old hat. I would rather see Embrace the End.
Fair, very fair.
But still, your point is taken. But taken. Pardon. But so the 99 and 2004 is essentially when we, you know, were the most active in touring and, you know, doing all our stuff that we did.
Yeah. I graduated high school in 2004. So like, I actually never got to go to Jim Dandy's because my parents in high school and life and whatnot. So like,
yep,
I didn't start going to shows till the Pound.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
and I mean, when we fortunately did play the Pound, but yeah, we started, I mean, I want to say the last time we played there was probably 2003 or something. You know, but we just tried to do as much as we humanly could, you know, because some of them were in college. Like, we all built our lives around the band, where it's like we had, you know, I mean, I was fortunately working at a record store where I could tour and come back and have a job. Like, we all built our lives around it. But then, you know, I mean, like, there was no path to sustainability of like, oh, we got to make a career out of this. I mean, we were on the precipice of doing, in my opinion, what would have been the logical next step of like, we could have broken out to maybe a wider audience. Like, we were going to sign with the Militia Group, and there was all this there was all this like cool stuff headed in our direction. But then, you know, real life gets in the way, and that's when we lost members. And then, you know, there was no reason for us to continue under that moniker. So yeah,
it's so crazy when you talk to older people like us about how close, like, I didn't know that with Militia Group about Taken, like Moria, for example. To bring them up again, when they broke up, they had a contract from Metal Blade.
Yeah,
it was a good one. Like, it was like, do you remember Metal Blade for a while did that? Like, oh, okay, we're established, but we're gonna take a chance on these younger bands and like give them a better deal than they'd probably get somewhere else.
Oh,
so it wasn't like
it
wasn't like a huge record deal, but for at the time it was like they had that, and it was like, dude, we're all in college, like we can't. Only one of us can commit to this, you know? Yeah, and it's like, and then the more and more people I talk to, it's a story just like that, or your guys's, you know, where it's just like, you know, sometimes fate deals you a different hand, you know?
Right. And it was never, because there was, even though there was a lot of excitement around that particular world, like there was not enough there to be like, is this going to be something that we can quote unquote rely on?
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's fine, because it's like everything that we were able to accomplish with the limited means of what we had. It was like, the fact that people still bring that up, it's just like, you shouldn't care about this. Like, the fact that we can put out an EP in 2018 and have people still be engaged with that, it's like, dude, come on. Like, that's just dumb. Like,
which was incredible, by the way.
And I appreciate that, because we put a lot of thought and effort into it, and we didn't want, I mean, not like there was this like, oh, we're going to tarnish our legacy. We were just like, we don't want to put something out that like bums people out to just
you don't want to put out something that sucks. Like,
no, right. It's like, we just want to put something out that will impact the people that need to know about it. And then if there's other people that join along or like, oh, I didn't even know you guys were a band, which is, we totally got that. Like, every time we played a show, where it's like, you know, playing a show with like, you know, Seosin or Atreyu or whatever, and people would be like, hey, when are you guys playing another show? I'm like, I don't know. Like, when our friends ask us, like,
yeah, you're like, probably never.
are you touring anytime soon? It's like, absolutely not. No, like unless you fly to Japan, like, yeah, that's all we got going. Yeah,
I love that.
But it's fun to be able to still be active with that, and then obviously ultimately that people still care about it, and we're just like, this is great.
I love that, and I'm so happy for you, especially.
Thank you, man.
Like you're a good person, and you have so many good things to say. Like it's so hard. Like everyone, especially from our time frame, the PMA gets brought up a lot still, but it's hard to live it. It's hard to like. You're one of the few people I feel like I say that's still in my sphere where you're like you are a whole like. You're just such a good, positive person, and you've stayed that way. Like life's thrown you curveballs, and you've still stayed the course. You know, it's real hard to get knocked off track. You know, I've done it.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, you feel like you're tumbling into a world of cliches when it's just like, you know, the positive mental attitude and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, it's easy to wear that when you haven't been confronted with any level of tragedy in your life. Like it's easy to have PMA when you're 16. You're like, and the worst thing that's happened to you is like, oh damn, I got a B on my math quiz or whatever. But it's like, yeah, that to your point, it's like as you grow older, like of course the hard edges of life start to, creep in on you. But if you ultimately have more to be thankful about than to be, hard on yourself about, like that's kind of the core guiding principle. And you can ultimately be able to pull all of these cliches that we've learned within the context of punk and hardcore and be like, oh, some of that is applicable. Some of that is a total, just BS and stupid. Yeah. Like it's just platitudes. It's the same difference as like, you walking into a person's house and, life, love, like whatever. They have one of those signs up on their wall.
Yeah, it goes, it's live, love, Limp Bizkit, right?
Right. That's exactly right. But it's like, it's hard not to look at that and be like, that's just a cliche. And it doesn't actually mean anything to you until you've like gone through it. And it doesn't mean to say that like, oh, if you're not old, like you can't have these genuine emotions, but it doesn't, it means a lot more when you've kind of, like you said, you've gone through trials and tribulations to be like, oh, I can still remain intact as a human. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
We have nothing in our house that says any of those cliches on it. The only signage we have that would consider that, I bought Trina a little tiny, those, you walk by Target and they have those like cheesy, funny things.
Of course.
When we first moved in together, because her and I moved in together at 6 months because I kind of got screwed out of a place to live. Like we took a big risk, but it worked out. We're still together, 7+ years later.
Yeah.
I bought her a little like canvas print that's like, it's like eggs and bacon. And the sign, it just says, "You had me at bacon" instead of "You had me at hello."
Perfect.
And like, still have that up. You know what I mean? Like
summarizes your relationship. It's
are you still vegan?
I am. Yep. And
well, I'm glad you still appreciate that.
Of course.
Joke / image.
I would be, it would be pretty ridiculous if I was like, Joel, I'm pretty angry at that sign.
You know what? On the note of veganism, one of our establishments, because I still eat meat, but I've been on trying to be better about being healthier. I also don't eat meat every day anymore. I will not do that. Sure. Like I try to only eat meat like 4 times a week at the most.
Sure.
We lost Saturn.
I know, dude. I can't remember who told me, but I was just, I was crestfallen. I mean, it's tough because that establishment, like they changed their menu a little bit over time, but there are certain like the OG of OG vegan spots. Sometimes they just ride off that draft of like, all right, man, like, you're going to come here. We know you're going to come. Like, we know everybody knows about this. Yes. So we don't really need to be inventive with our menu and like offer anything different.
Or do marketing or any of that other business stuff.
That's true. Or like, like have a website or whatever. Like, it's tough. But I mean, regardless, like Saturn, obviously an institution, and it's it's a shame it's not there anymore, because that was what you do in Santa Cruz. You go to the record stores, you go to the 418, or you go to the That's All, and you hit Saturn after the show.
You know what? I'm glad you know Davey, because we're gonna bring him up like one more time. I have to do this. Like, I know everyone's gonna be like, man, this Joel guy's obsessed. But I actually got kicked out of Saturn once.
Okay.
Because, well, I didn't get kicked out. I got asked to hurry up and finish my meal.
Sure.
Because AFI played the Civic Auditorium that night, and they wanted they were bringing their staff to come eat at Saturn, and they knew that they would be bugged too much because it's Santa Cruz, and so they actually asked Saturn to clear the restaurant out.
Dude, that's awesome. Like, that's awesome that they were able to pull that off. Be like, hey guys, you got a hard close at 8, because we're gonna, we're gonna bring our whole people.
And like, they straight up told me, oh, like AFI is coming to eat here, and they don't want anybody that's not part of their team in the building because like they want to not be disturbed. And I was like, well, I want to eat my food, but damn, that's tight. Like, okay, I'll go. Like,
respect, right?
Yeah, I'm like, peace, dudes. Like, thanks, kick me out, dude.
If you told me a super cheesy band, then I would be like, like I don't think so. But it's like AFI, of course. I'll finish my meal. Yes.
Yeah. If you were like, oh, ICP needs your booth, I'd be like, fuck off.
Right.
Like,
it's like, why are you eating here? You guys don't care about this.
Yeah. 1, why are you eating here? 2, whoop whoop. Yeah. 3, like, I'll buy you some Faygo and we're all good, dude.
Totally. Like, we're square, man. You don't need to come here.
Oh Jesus. Well, so I have one last thing I want to ask you about before we start wrapping the show. This is actually, so, you've jumped around a lot after Taken. You were at Century Media. You were at Peta 2. Were you at Peta? Is there a Peta 1 before I ask a dumb question?
No, it's okay. I mean, it's all Peta, but like Peta 2 is basically just the marketing arm of like the youth side of the company, where it was like at one point they felt like they needed to separate the two. So yeah, but Peta is all one entity.
Okay, and then like you were at Century Media. You did a stint, or are you still involved with? Is it No Sleep? Right? Correct.
I was consulting with No Sleep when I was at Peta for about 3 years or so. And then when I say consulting, like that sounds like so shady, but basically I was just helping. Like the label is growing so much, they didn't really have a staff. And so I've known Chris for forever. And so Chris was basically just like, hey, can you help me like with these sort of business things that I've never had to deal with before, and like negotiating with bands and all this other stuff. So I was like, well, I did that at Century, so I can easily help you here, and then try to like help you get set up for the future a little bit better.
So the two main things I want to know how that whole timeline, how it kind of happened. How did you end up getting into the business side of stuff? Yeah. And how
it was all because of Taken. So basically when Century Media, I worked at Century Media or it was 2002 to like 2009 or so. But basically it was because they were looking at Taken to sign. This is when it's not too dissimilar to what you're talking about with Morio, where it was like all of those metal labels were looking to capitalize on hardcore, and they were talking to everybody, your Bleeding Throughs, your Throwdowns, anybody who was like out there and doing relatively well was getting spoken to.
Especially from California.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So they were looking at us to sign. And then I became friendly with the A&R guy there, a guy named Steve Joe, still one of my close friends and just a great human being. Yeah.
Shouts, dude.
Totally. Great human. Legitimately cares about the music and bands, like in ways that I'm so thankful that I encountered him, because I see how you can navigate that and still care about it. But
like if I had to take like a Highlander showdown of the two nicest people in the music industry, I would give you and Steve Joe a broadsword each, and like just let you two figure it out. Like
we'll just probably put it down and hug each other.
Exactly, and that's why I love both of you.
Yeah, we definitely are peas in a pod from that perspective. But then, Steve, he was just like, you know a lot about the music industry just by default, because I was the business arm of Taken. I was the guy that was putting all the shows together and doing everything from the business side of the band. And then he was just like, have you ever thought about working a label? And I was like, yeah, but like I don't know where to begin. And so he was like, well, hey, we're doing this thing called Abacus, which is basically a hardcore imprint of Century Media. So like, come on board, we can do this together. And so that's how I got introduced to the label side of things, and then did that through the different iterations. Like it was technically I was working for Abacus, but it was like I was doing everything at Century Media. I got assigned bands to be like, okay, like anything that remotely fell into the not metal side of things, I got assigned to, where it's like, yeah, you work with, in this moment, you work with, obviously it's like Suicide Silence and Wings of Plague, like worked with all those dudes. And so did that up until Peta then basically knocked on my door. We're like, hey, we're doing this like celebrity marketing thing. Like and I really didn't see a path forward at Century Media in regards to, because obviously the music industry had changed so much by that juncture. It's like 2008, 2009. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to be like my forever home. So I went to Peta, and then at Peta is when I was doing the no sleep stuff. And then Peta, then, I was doing the podcast at Peta. And then I got introduced to the podcast industry via a company called Midroll and Stitch. Well, at that time, Stitcher didn't exist, but Midroll was basically a podcast company, does a lot of production of shows and then also sells advertising. They picked up my podcast to do advertisements for. And so again, I got to know them. They were just like, you know a lot about, like, you care, like, you know obscure metalcore bands and a lot about podcasts. I was like, yes, those are my two areas of expertise. And so
you're like, that's all that's on my resume here.
Yeah, totally. It's like, yeah, you want to talk about Red Roses for a Blue Lady? I'll talk about, Eulogy Records and, everything that they've released from, 98 to like 2003. But, yeah, so that's how I got into the podcast side of things, and then that's what I've been doing ever, for the past 7 years or so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I've never asked you this question.
Okay,
how did you get involved with Sound and Fury? Like, how did that?
So that transpired because the original owners of it, they came to my friend Joey and I, and they were like, because this was 2009, I want to say. They basically they had run it, like, it was 3 of them originally. It was like Todd Jones, Riley, who runs it now, and then this guy named Bob. And basically we were friends with all of them. They came to us because they were like, we don't want to do this anymore. Like, we're all pulled in different directions. This isn't where our life is right now. They came to Joey and I and were like, would you be interested in, like, straight up just buying this as a business from us? So we worked something out to where we're like, hey, like, I've been best friends with Joey ever since, he toured with the band. So, like, ever since we were like 20. So we've been, friends for like 20 plus years at this point.
Yeah.
Him and I talked about it and we were like, all right, like, let's try this. And so we had, the first time that we did it was 2010, I want to say. And so we did it for 3 years. And so basically him and I just worked together. We booked it, did all of the logistics, everything. And I was grateful that we did it. I mean, as you well know, like, an absolute nightmare. Like, there's nothing that could be more stressful than putting on a 3-day music festival with like 70 plus bands. It was just, awful. But, so I don't regret, like, it was 2013. We had announced the first round of bands. It just became very clear that, I mean, at that time, like, I had a child, I had been married for a couple of years, and in my heart of hearts, I'm like, listen, if we don't do that, neither of us did it as a full-time endeavor. If we take a bath on this festival for, like, we lose $800,000. I mean, that being hyperbolic, but like, if we lose so much money, I can't go to my wife and my child and be like, hey, this hardcore fest didn't work out. Like, we can't eat. I was just like, they didn't sign up for that. They did not do it.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly.
And it just became untenable for us. So, like, I just went to Joey and I was like, dude, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is just this. It's not even so much like the commitment from a time perspective or like how much money we made, because, like, if you equated it out to like how much work we put into it on an hourly perspective, like, we could just get a job at Starbucks or whatever. Like, we would have made infinitely more money. But versus like doing the show, it felt like there was way more risk than reward at that point. And then we just basically wrapped it up. And then it was dormant for, I want to say 3 years. And then basically that's when multiple people kind of came to the table and they were like, hey, what are you guys doing with that? And we're like, nothing. Do you want to do something with it? Because ultimately we still wanted it to continue on, but we didn't want it to, be in someone's hands that wasn't going to be a good steward or good shepherd of it, or was going to do something new with it. And so it was really funny because we were talking to a few different people, and then we were kind of like pretty far along in discussions with one person who was, completely interested in doing a lot of cool stuff. But then the original owners then came back, like Riley, and he had a new partner. It was Martine from Terror. They were like, hey, we want to do it. And we were like, oh, okay. Like, let's figure this out.
Here.
Yeah. It was like, this is great. You guys want to do it. You guys want to put it in a whole new like light. And obviously for kids that are, are younger. And, but yeah, so it worked out and we sold it technically back to them, whatever, in 2016, 17, I can't remember whatever year they did it, but it was a good 3 years that we did the fest, and it was a lot.
So tight. Yeah. I got to ask, from a promoter and a West Coast kid standpoint, how on earth did you guys choose and end up with Santa Barbara for your location? Like, did you want a centralized location?
Yeah, well, since Sound and Fury had always kind of been in that area, we really wanted to keep that because, like, I mean, as a fan, prior to us having the business ownership of it, it had always been in Santa Barbara. It had always been in the Earl Warren Showgrounds. One year, I think it was 2009, I want to say, they did it in Oxnard at some random hall. And it just was like, it was different. It just didn't feel the same. And so it was, I mean, it was, to me, it was always really random that it was in Santa Barbara. But I think what made it so cool was because, you know, it's a sleepy beachside community, retirement people, like, you know, you, of course, you have the college there, but
yes, it's me as a town. Yes, I know. Trust me.
You get it. But then it felt so special that kids from around the world could experience what Southern California actually was from a beach perspective and just like get that real vibe. I mean, there'd be kids who would literally just like camp out on the beach and then go to the show. And it was just so cool to have that. So we really wanted to keep that going. And Earl Warren was incredibly easy to work with. Like, awesome. So we just felt, we were just like, let's continue to do it there, where it was like, they were already familiar with it. Like we honestly, we did kick the tires for a while at the Ventura State Fairgrounds, but because they were always doing Warped Tour around that time we were looking to plan it, and they always had their summer festival stuff, it just never like it would have been perfect to do it there because there was so much versatility in the size of rooms and stuff, but it just never synced up. So we just always did it at Earl Warren, and there was plenty of room from a capacity perspective. Like I think the last year that we did it, we sold it out all 3 days, but it was like the only reason we sold it out is because, as you well know, it's like when you have that many bands, like the guest list is stupid. We're like 30% of the capacity is guest. Yeah. And it's like, oh, geez. Yeah. But yeah, that's why
was that the year someone rode a motorcycle into the pit?
That was our first year. That was 2010. What a poop show that was.
How was that?
Oh, dude, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare because because we had to shut the show down. There was only, I think fortunately it was Sunday. So and there was only maybe 5 or 6 bands that were left to play. So there was no, like, I think after there was literally only maybe 1 or 2 people that emailed us for like a refund. And we were like, really? Like you got through 90% of the festival. Like you're not getting a refund. But it was a nightmare from the, just like shutting the show down. And it was like, you know, having to, like, I was on the phone, like with 911 being like, yeah, I need like riot control police here. And just like how tenuous.
No.
Yeah. It just, you know, these are things that you never want to go through. And then like having to literally protect the security guards, because like basically what happened after the kid, it wasn't so much that the kid rode the motorcycle in the venue, which obviously already was a nightmare, but it was once they had gotten outside, a security guard was basically, you know, sort of sleeping at the post. That's why they got into the building. But then once they got out of the building, the security guard saw that, was going for the kid to try to get them off of the motorcycle for obvious reasons. And then there was, you know, a group of kids that were out there that felt that that was a threatening act, and then started to really kind of lay into the security guard. Security guard pepper sprayed people to be like, listen, it's 1 versus 15. Like, I can't, like, stay away from me. And so it got to a point where we literally had to, is like me, Joey, and our friends were like a barrier of humans between the security guards and this, until like the police actually came. Cause it was like, dude, this was like, I mean, we didn't know all of that at that juncture. We just knew that this couldn't escalate to an actual riot. We're just like, listen, these kids are trying to kill these security guards. Like, we can't have that. So that was, it was terrible. It was just like, I mean, in retrospect, it was easily one of the worst things I've ever experienced, like at a show from that perspective. But then, you know, like there was funny stuff that happened after the fact where it was just like people were trying to figure out who the motorcycle rider was and all this other stuff. And it was hilarious because people, bringing it back to Davey Havoc, people started a rumor on the Bridge 9 board that it was Davey Havoc. Clearly it was not. But the Earl Warren Showgrounds people, the next day, they had done their internet research. At one point, they were like,
no.
Oh, dude, it was amazing. They were just like, they're like, we think we know who it is. And they're like, I'm not even exaggerating. They like literally slid a piece of paper over to us. And they were like, are you guys friendly with, a guy named Davey Havoc? We think it's him. And Joey and I were just like, what the hell are we doing? What is this? This is insane. But it was hilarious.
Oh, man.
Totally.
Oh my God. Well, now I'm really glad I asked about that story.
Yeah.
Davey Havoc, if you listen to this, call me. So
yeah, totally.
I might as well have you on the show at this point in time. Shit, Jesus.
Yeah. No, I know. We brought you up 3 separate times. So here we go.
I think 4 technically.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ray, I have loved having you on. I close my show with a few basic, like the typical silly questions.
Sure. Let's go.
So we're gonna get to that. All right. What's your favorite color?
Red.
You're the first person I think that's ever said that.
Oh, well, it's red. Red's my best color. Best color.
In my 48 episodes, you're the first person. You know what the winner right now is green and purple.
I was going to say green probably seems green or blue. Like that's what I would imagine most people to say.
Green is my favorite, so I'm impartial. But a lot of people have been saying purple lately, which is like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But red, no questions to
ask. Okay. The next, we got to talk about tour stuff.
Okay.
What's your favorite food at home?
Okay.
And what's your favorite food you can only get on tour? So, or when you travel, because you travel for work.
So there is the thing that I missed the most when I would tour is, and this is going to sound bizarre, but like cereal. I love cereal. And so like when you're on tour, you can't, like, it's not easy to access cereal because you're not rolling around with like milk. Like, yes, you can eat cereal out of the box, but like having the true cereal experience, you can't get. So when we would stay at people's places, which obviously was a majority of the time because we were not getting hotels for sure, I would, we'd go to a person's house and then I would kind of like sidle up to them, after we've developed some rapport and be like, hey, do you have any cereal? And then they'd be like, you got any soy milk? Like it was so weird because people would just be like, why are you asking for that? And I'm like, well, because I can't have cereal as I'm on tour and I just love cereal. So,
I've never.
Yeah,
you're right. All I have to say is you're right.
Thank you. Yeah, there are like I said, it sounds weird, but like when you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, like that is not an easy thing to travel with. So I just always missed cereal. So that was something that like, I guess you could technically say you can only really have at home. I mean, there's millions of other things that you can only have, but that was just the first thing that came to my mind. But as far as on tour is concerned, I really, I loved, I tour managed a few bands. I tour managed Alexis on Fire on one tour. I had never eaten a Cracker Barrel because I was always like, dude, what the hell is a Cracker Barrel for like a person like me who is vegetarian vegan? And then we stopped there and the singer George was vegetarian at the time. And he was like, dude, they have a veggie plate. It's great. For sure not vegan. I was only vegetarian at the time, but they had this, it was a veggie plate. It was like, like whatever, corn, peas, like, mashed potatoes. It was amazing. And so like that was for years, I would just love to eat Cracker Barrel and be like, oh yeah, give me them biscuits, give me a veggie plate. And I was the cheapest date. I was like $8 or something like
seriously.
That. Yeah, but it was great.
Yeah.
That's definitely I don't eat it anymore, but that is definitely, because it does not exist really in Southern California, it was always special to be like, dude, the first Cracker Barrel's in Arizona. In the same way that like when people travel out here and they're like, dude, Del Taco. It's like, I know, right?
Oh, I forgot to give you the disclaimer. We don't talk about Del Taco on the show.
Are you a Taco Bell stan?
No. They've shut down every Del Taco within 3 hours of me in Northern California. Like I have to go to Fresno.
My thoughts and condolences.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you. Yes. But I mean, I do love Taco Bell, but that's not the point.
Okay. That's fine. I will not utter those words anymore.
Okay. I'm going to give you a third question from the food just because you're my first true vegan guest on the show. Sure. West Coast, just, what's your favorite vegan West Coast restaurant?
Well, I mean, the a restaurant that's like easy to access, like, Veggie Grill is great. Like it's a very, fast casual, like they have multiple locations up and down the West Coast. So it's like easy for people to like dip into and check out and it's the least confrontational. You can take any carnivore there and they're going to find food that they enjoy. So I really like the simplicity of that. Okay. And obviously it's sort of pervasiveness in regards to people being able to access this. Cause I mean, there's millions of places that are just one place, but like, so it's like, oh yeah, you can go there in LA.
That's what I want. Like, what's your one place? Like if you were going to tell me one place.
Yeah. So there's, actually this is now developing into a chain. There is a chain called Plant Power, which is basically, it's basically In-N-Out except vegan. And I mean, and they have a little more expansive menu. It's not just like double or cheeseburger. They have like chicken burgers and all that stuff. But it's really, so they have locations in like some places in Southern California, a little bit in the Inland Empire, but it is expanding a little bit. I think they're opening a location in Arizona, but that is unbelievably good because again, it's super simple. It's like, you know, you can spend $15 and get, you know, fries, a burger, a shake, like just all that stuff. And it's just, it's really, it's again, simple and good. Like I love that.
I was down in your neck of the woods. I think it was Christmas time. It was either 2018 or 2019. Albert had me come down for the Decibel Metal Fest that they do.
Yeah.
I got introduced to that place, Monty's.
Spectacular. Great burger.
Dude,
great burger.
I was like blown. Like, I will already eat vegan food and vegetarian food. Like, that. I'm not shy about that information to anybody. But like, I was like blown the fuck away eating there. Like, I was like, I would eat this over a regular hamburger.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
super good.
Okay. Tight.
Yeah. Love it. Tight.
Okay.
Well, thanks for having me, bud. I appreciate it.
Oh, no. I got 2 more questions.
Okay. Sorry.
Wawa or Sheetz?
I would say Wawa, just because I have more experience at Wawa. Okay, Sheetz I've only been to a couple of times. Wawa is just they just, I mean, I think they both obviously have their merits but they are so much exponentially better than like a 7-Eleven, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Wawa, I just have more experience, so I'll go with them.
I know you haven't watched the show because that's a trick question. The real answer is Buc-ee's. Well,
I mean, I get that. Like I have less experience with Buc-ee's. I've only been to one Buc-ee's.
That's all you need though.
Yeah, no, I know. But I would still go for Wawa. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
I know. I'm sorry. It's okay.
I'm having heart palpitations now.
I know. I frankly, I just need to have more experience. That's what I need.
It's okay. Okay. Yeah. Last question. And then you're free, my friend. You're free. So this might not apply to you because you're a pretty open person like me, but people in the music industry, especially people involved in businesses, like there's not necessarily a front or a facade that we put up, but there's certain things that people might not know about you or like a characteristic or a habit you have that like the general public doesn't know about Ray. Yeah. Like if you had to say one thing that you wish more people knew about you, like whether it's again, hobby, personality trait, characteristic, just a passion. What would that be?
I would say that. So I mean, something that I'm proud of as far as like a character. I mean, like I do self-identify as a Christian. Like faith is important to me, and I think that's something that obviously is not like ever in vogue or in fashion within our community. I mean, of course, like the Christ Core stuff exists, but it's like we're separate from that. Like that's not cool. People are just like, oh yeah, like you like religion is dogma and all that sort of stuff. And I agree with most of that because religion in and of itself is man-made, so obviously imperfect. But relationship with spirituality, like that's what I'm more focused on. So yeah, and I mean I know that like in the past, like I definitely have been. Like people did lump in Taken at one point being like, oh, Christian adjacent, which is like, well, yeah, like maybe 1 or 2 members are, but like that was never our focus or anything like that. So yeah, that's just something that I'm proud of. And I like to engage with people that, are interested. And it's just like, like, what does that look like for you? What is like faith and all that sort of, weird, stuff that I'm like, as a person who is like completely agnostic or straight up atheist, like, I don't agree with you. I'm like, that's fine. There are different paths for different people, but yeah, so that's probably one thing that, I'm not ashamed of, but like, I don't necessarily get the opportunity to bring it up or talk about it. So that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Ray, I love that. I consider myself a man of the faith as well. So like, I don't practice, like I was raised Catholic.
Sure.
I identify as a Christian, I would say, but I don't like the church structure. I don't like like the authoritative, like,
right.
So like my outlook is like when Jesus died for us, yes, we're taught that was his greatest gift.
Yeah.
I actually don't think that was God's greatest gift to us. I think the fact is God's all powerful, supposedly, and all knowing, supposedly. I'm saying supposedly for the non-believers.
Right.
But he gave us free will.
Yeah, exactly. To choose.
To me, the fact that he gives us the choice to choose when he doesn't have to, that what more do you need, you know? So
yeah, for sure. No, you can carve your own path, whatever that may mean. And that is ultimately the most exciting thing that anybody has in their lives, whether or not they decide to pursue something spiritual or whether they decide to go the complete opposite direction and be like, no, like there's nothing after this life. It's like, okay, that's great. And that's only afforded in our perspectives via, like you said, that gift of being like, well, I'm not telling you what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I am, but I'm not. So yeah.
I love it. All right, Ray, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I appreciate you. You're like I said, you're an influence to me. I don't, I wouldn't necessarily call you like what's the term? Yeah, you're just an influence for me. You know what I mean? Like we all have the people that kind of like help them come before, and then there's like the people that help me continue. You're in that list. Like you're one of the people in the biz that I look at more like an inspiration.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's like, that's the only way it works. It's like, people that are a little bit older than you look at them, you'll be like, oh, that's cool what they're doing. Like, I want to do some version of that. And it's like, it just continues to get passed down because there are people that absolutely think that of you, whether you know it or not. And so, yeah, it's really cool. But thank you for saying that, Joel. I appreciate it.
Of course. Well, thank you for being on the show. How can everybody follow you and what's the best way to look up your podcast?
At X-Purpose X everywhere on every social media platform. I've always been that since I was 16 years old and chose that screen name and then continued on throughout my whole life. And then, you can just find it 100 words using the number, but you can find it on any podcast platform imaginable. It's pretty easy to find.
Tight. Excellent. Well, everyone, this has been another, you know where you are. I'm not even going to do the outro. Ray, thanks for being here with me. I appreciate it. Everybody that listened or watched, thanks. Drop the subscribe, drop the review, the likes, hit the stars. You all know the routine. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.